Hello and welcome to the Game Changer series for Global Entrepreneurship Week 2016, supported by Business Crowd. I'm very pleased to be interviewing Michelle Raymond today of the People's Partner, which is a specialist HR consultancy and coaching practice for when we need to expand our businesses and be looking at recruiting and making the best of the people we have in our business. So welcome, Michelle.
Welcome. Thank you for having me.
And tell us a little bit about your journey into running your own business. How long have you been running the People's Partner for?
So I've been running the People's Partner now for about 2 years, and I started off predominantly doing policies and procedures for small to medium businesses, making sure that they had the right paperwork in place to make sure that they were legally compliant. So I've got a background in mediation and employment law. So that was just the easiest way to get in through the door that way, really. And I quickly, and because I had a background in coaching, so I expanded it into coaching, as a lot of people are coming to me for interviewing coaching, how to, get their CV up to scratch, how to even negotiate when they've been disciplinary and grievance hearings, so that type of thing. And because with most hearings, you can only bring in somebody who is already in the company. So I saw a spot there on how to help people negotiate better when they're dealing with grievances or dealing with redundancies, that type of thing. And from there, I started working with a number of companies and helping. So it might be team building days or coming to do group coaching sessions with the teams, especially if they have a very diverse team, is how to get the best out from different people. And so this is what I do on my day-to-day work, and I love it.
That's great. So what are the sorts of challenges that you find organisations have? If we start from the very beginning, when they're looking at that all-important first hire of an employee.
I find that so if we're talking about like a small business owner, for them, they've had this vision of how they want their business to be, how it should look, and it's like their baby. And I find that entrepreneurs or business owners, they are really scared to share their true vision for the business because they either feel like people run off with the idea, or they just won't get it the way that they can see it in their heads. So because of that, they're very reticent in really showing what the business can do, what they can do. But you need that level of communication with either your new recruit, because they need to understand where the business is and where you want the business to go. So there's got to be a level of trust. So I think trust is the main thing when you're with your first hire, because that person's going to be living and breathing your business. You want to feel rest assured that if you're not there, they can run the business and it's in safe hands. So I think a level of trust from both parties is definitely required. Definitely.
Absolutely. Trust is really important. The other thing I find that is also really important is really understanding the values of your business and therefore the values of the people that you're looking to recruit, and making sure that that's in alignment.
Yeah, I think you're so right there. And the problem is a lot of people, they have an idea, make a business out of it, but they don't actually understand the true values of the business. What do we stand for? What do we represent? How do I want to come across? And if you don't actually understand your true inherent values, it's very hard then to get that across and create the right culture going. Because if it's just you can have that right culture, but once it's one other person who's in the mix, cultural dynamics change. So it's really important to get that right from the beginning, get that common purpose from the beginning.
Absolutely. It becomes the way we do things, doesn't it? And thinking, I always advise business owners to spend a bit of time, if they haven't done so already, to actually think about, as you say, their philosophy, what they stand for, because business, whilst it's about generating profit, creating services and products that serve the market, a lot of people buy into brand, and it's that emotional side of a business actually that your employees, particularly those in sales, customer service, they're representing that day in, day out. So having that alignment is really critical. What are the best tools if you were recommending to a growing business owner? What would be the best tools for identifying really what goes on for individuals? Because I think most people, obviously, we see what they present at an interview, and we can interview and we can have conversations where we might believe that somebody's the right fit for our business. How do we go beyond that? Do you use things like profiling or?
Right, so I have used profiling in the past, and yeah, I think it definitely works. But I think sometimes it's just having that. Well, I think profiling and all the different types of assessments, it's so cold, it's so standoffish. It's not, you get the tick box exercise, but I think to really understand whether you've got the right person, the tools you need is just dialogue. Do you know, you find out so much from a person when you just sit and talk with them, and they tell you, and people like talking about themselves, so it's quite an easy tool. And once people start talking about themselves, you get to find out what makes them tick, what makes them happy, you know, things that, okay, I can tell that person's quite introvert, that person's, you know, you find out more about that person just by having this open and honest dialogue with that person. And that dialogue will tell you so much about the person, and then you work out, gosh, will this work within our organization? Is that person adaptable? Will that person deal with changes in my business? How will they respond to things? And I think that you can't take away that dialogue. All the profiling in the world, what's the one I did recently? I can't remember what it's called. But it worked out that I was an IGNS or something like that, and which means I'm quite talkative, I'm a people person, I'm quite extrovert, that type of thing. And yeah, and that is who I am. But if I was to be a part of someone's business, I want them to understand of me. The other side, which is the caring, is the quiet bit, the listening bit, and that may not come across on that profile. So, but having that dialogue with me, you get to understand that bit, and then that the business owner can then make an informed decision. I think you know, having, and especially with new businesses, they have the time on their hands to spend to do that. Growing or larger businesses do not have that luxury.
Yeah, so I absolutely would look at, if I was in the position of hiring or advising somebody on hiring, looking at StrengthsFinder, as well as a couple of the other tools that I use, which are GC Index and Disc Profiling, which was the first one I ever had in my corporate life, which I find still holds relatively true today, because that's more focused on behaviours. StrengthsFinder is obviously on strengths. Yes. The Game Changer Index helps us look at how people express their best contribution in a business, and we've got an interview with Nathan Ott as part of the series, who's one of the co-creators of that. I find the intelligence that you can get from a profile really good, but also, as you say, that needs to be managed by having a really structured program almost in the first 90 days, which I think, as you're growing a business, when you're in that first, if you like, 1 to 50 employees, is absolutely critical to get that right. So having a structured 90-day take-on program where you have agreed objectives, and you may even be operating under trial contracts at that point in time. What's your thought on trial contracts and kind of objective-based performance review in the first 3 months?
I think it's, as long as the person who is, with most companies, there's two things. There's induction and there's onboarding. Now, with induction, a lot of companies do induction but don't do onboarding. And for me, the two induction is showing you what the company does, how to use the systems, how to answer the phone, those types of things, which is, I think, is just, it doesn't really get to the bottom of how the business really operates. Whereas onboarding, if, like you say, like a 90-day program, a 3-month program, onboarding is really understanding the culture, the vision, the purpose of the business, understanding that individual persons. So it's not, onboarding is not just one way, it's 2 ways. So you understand them as a business, and the new hire understands the business. It's a 2-way thing, whereas induction is just 1 way. And I think there's so much merit in that. So if I was to put my employment law hat on, there's no law saying that you have to do this. It's not a prerequisite or anything. So it's definitely a company policy, let's put it that way. But I think it's only worth doing if it's going to be done properly, if it's going to be done efficiently, and a lot of companies fall short of that because they all say they give the person work to do, they check in with them once a month or something like that, but they haven't got any really clear targets. Is the culture of one that if there is issues, that person feels confident enough to come up and say something without feeling, oh my God, this is going to impinge my 3-month probation. And that's the problem as well, because if they know they're on a 3-month probation, if I'm not confirmed after this, I'm going to be gone. So I don't want to raise any issues that I'm having. But I try and encourage companies, have that conversation, allow them to come forward if they don't feel comfortable about something, or they feel like they've done something wrong, because this is the growing stage, this is the development stage, and so it can only work if both managers and the hires are going to be in agreement that this is open dialogue.
And I'm also going to add to that, I think as well, for somebody that's coming into a business in those first 90 days, actually that's when they can make their impact. That's when they can really show their value. If you have an open culture that encourages that, if you have a non-judgmental dialogue where they're encouraged perhaps to suggest improvements. I mean, let's be honest, we've all gone into roles, and in those first couple of weeks, that's where we see how things can be massively improved.
Yeah, and you come, and they come with fresh eyes, so they see like, this could be done a bit better. I've just come from this organisation. This is how we used to do it here. Let's benchmark type of thing. But once again, like you said, if there isn't that that open dialogue, that won't happen. But also to add, I will say, is I found in one company that it was very hard, and they had a 3-month probation. It was very hard for that person to deliver or to really show what they had within that 3 months. So there needs to be how to put it? There needs to be a culture where if we extend your probation to 6 months, it doesn't mean you've done something wrong. It's just giving you enough time to really find your feet. And I think people's mentality is, if I'm on a if they've extended my probation, I was doing something wrong. But it's just sometimes impossible to really deliver on your work and really develop value in 3 months. So I think it's got to be quite fluid.
Yeah, so clear communication and that objective setting, understanding those milestones, whether you're somebody going into work for a startup or whether you are somebody that's hiring and growing your business, from either side can suggest these things, I think, in a business scenario. And, I'd recommend that most people do, whichever side of the fence that they're sitting on. What would be your 3 things, Michelle, then, that employers want to consider to create a thriving culture and a growth mindset in the business?
The 3 things they should consider for growth. I would definitely say, as I'm a big fan of communication, I think communication skills, definitely. And the reason why I say communication skills, because my background's in NLP, so I understand how the use of words, the use of linguistics can just change the whole course of what you're trying to say. So and understanding how people read what you're saying as well. So communication, definitely. And another thing is about how to build relationships, I guess, as well, with your team, and having that trust element with your team, and knowing that, yes, some things might not always go well, but what is their motives behind it? What's the positive intention? So, don't see everything as a threat, or everything is, they don't want good for the business. Or I always look at what's the positive intention behind how people behave and act and respond. And I don't know, I would say how to deal with conflict. Because I believe conflict is inherent in every business, but it's how you deal with it. So if you have, if you're a type of business that you first have to understand there are going to be conflict, and it's how you deal with it. And I think that's really important in small and growing businesses.
Yeah. So taking it as that opportunity really to explore what people's thoughts are and what the reason is, because, I mean, everybody knows most people, I think, know the model around forming, norming, storming and performing, and that storming piece is so important almost in the early days of a business, where people can have those honest conversations and get the right ideas out and be able to test. And you often see it in highly technical environments where people are really invested, and what comes across as conflict is actually sometimes just people's expression of passion and the need to get things right.
Yeah. And they put pressure on themselves as well. They put so much pressure on themselves.
Yeah, and I think, I always thought in the corporate world, actually, particularly when we were looking at bringing graduates in or new hires into the business, there's a lot to be said for understanding. People quite often just look at those coming into their team from a what's the function they're going to perform perspective, but actually looking at the wider person more holistically in terms of what's going on in their family, in their circumstances in society, what is the conditioning that they've had, what are some of their life experiences. Once you can begin to build that depth of relationship with somebody, you can begin to understand their behaviour and look at how you might be making requests and how to really get the best from them by perhaps adapting some of the things within your organisation. Do you find that to be true?
No, I actually believe that's so true. I had a recent case, and it's the same thing. The person was saying, oh, she's underperforming, she's not doing her job properly, and, what can I do about this situation? So I said, have you even given her the chance, have you, given yourself the chance to really delve deep into find out why she's responding like this? Because clearly, there was a pattern. The pattern's been interrupted. So what's different? What things do you know that's happening at home that could be having an impact on how she's delivering at work? That type of thing. And I had to say to her, I would say stop the disciplinary and just go back and just try and rebuild that relationship with her to find out what's going on. Only to find out that the lady was she had a cancer scare.
Yeah.
And because of that, it just impacted how she just saw things and how she delivered her work. And so obviously, we didn't need to go any further. We didn't have to go to an ET or anything. But like you're saying, look at things in a holistic view and understand why people might act a certain way they do. What cultural norms have they been brought up? Once again, it comes into the cultural makeup of a person, and you find out so much more when you go beyond just the functionality of the role and really understanding, do I have the right person, the right personality, the right behaviours and the right attitude? And competency should cover more than just functionality of work.
Absolutely, absolutely. I experienced something similar with one of my program managers many years ago. Unbeknownst to us, this guy had just come in through a matrix managed organisation. and he had caring responsibilities that he'd kept very, very quiet because it was a very male-dominated organisation. And actually, by being able to build in that flexibility and get the team to consult with him on when it was the right time to do certain things, we were able to make a difference both to his home life but also how effective he was at work.
Yeah, definitely. I can imagine. Definitely.
Yeah. And I find when you do that with employees, actually their loyalty and what they give back to the business is so much more. How they look after your clients is better because they feel respected themselves.
Exactly. It comes back to, you know, if I understand you, you understand me, that type of thing. And I said a quote, I heard a quote from somebody and I repeated it, and it's slightly different and just going off topic, and it's around diversity and inclusion, but I guess the same principle is here, like with the example of the gentleman that you mentioned. You know, there's one thing about being invited to the party, so you know, you come to work, you do your job, but there's another thing being comfortable to dance at the party. Do you see what I mean? So, yeah, we're all part of the business, we're all doing it, but how comfortable do people feel about revealing what's happening, which will have an impact and people will be affected by it? So it's moving from being invited to the party to making sure your staff feel comfortable to dance.
Yeah, that's really great. So thank you very much for sharing that with us, Michelle. I think that's given people a lot of things to think about and things that they can take away and look at within how they manage their own organisations. What's the best way for people to contact you and to reach out if they're interested in working with the People's Partner?
The best way is by email, and my email address is Michelle, Michelle, at thepeoplepartner.com. Yeah, and my website is the same, so it'll be www.thepeoplespartner.com.
Okay, and those links will be published with the interview. Thank you very much for your time today. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.